I'm Iris Muller. I'm a certified rehabilitation counselor and a proud mom of 2 children, one of whom has quadriplegic cerebral palsy and is nonverbal.
And I'm Alma Schneider, a licensed clinical social worker and the proud mom of 4 children, one of whom has Prader-Willi syndrome.
In this podcast, we discuss the uncensored truth about raising kids with disabilities.
Prepare to laugh, cry, and hopefully learn something new. This is Two Moms, No Fluff. Hello, Iris.
Hello, Alma. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm doing okay. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Excited to record another episode.
Yes, me too. Well, everyone, welcome to Two Moms, No Fluff. For those of you who are new to our podcast, we are two moms who do not fluff, talking about all things related to parenting children with disabilities. And we are very happy that you're here today. We have an exciting episode for you today that I'll let Iris tell you about.
Yes, today we're going to talk about something that all of us have and we all celebrate. It's birthdays and how we, sorry?
I said, yay, birthdays.
Yeah, and how we celebrate them while including people with disabilities, especially the children with disabilities in the celebration, and
Yes.
how and maybe how and why we celebrate birthdays also for our children with disabilities. And we want to share some of those tips because obviously birthdays are important for children and adults alike. And we want to share the good, the bad, and the ugly sometimes of what happens during birthday parties with the hopes that this would help you with your friends with kids with disabilities and with your own children if they have a disability and how to navigate the birthday celebration.
Yeah, it can be, like all of the other topics or most of the topics that we discuss, there's an emotional piece and a practical piece. So the emotional piece, I always like to start with that because if we don't deal with the emotional piece, we might not be able to even address the practical pieces because our brains won't be able to wrap, our heads, we won't be able to wrap our heads around what we need to do or even know what our own needs are if we're not in the emotional space to do so. So birthdays. This also is an issue for, just like many of the topics that we discuss, this is an issue for regular parenting as well, parenting kids with typical lives, that it can be hurtful if our kids aren't invited to a birthday party. And let's face it, even if we as adults are not invited to somebody's birthday party, we might get upset about it. Or have that FOMO, that fear of missing out. But when it's our child, that lioness in us comes out like, what? They didn't invite my child? And it might be, anger, but the real truth is underneath that anger is sadness and fear and isolation that our kid isn't being included. So it's a legit feeling. It is a legit feeling because, as Iris, you mentioned, these are milestones. It's a place where kids come together and they're typically a very positive experience. And we want our kids to be able to participate in those with their peers. So when they're not invited or when something goes awry at a party, it can be really, really upsetting. So let me start off with the concept of communication, which is very important. Sometimes our friends and our family don't realize that it's important for our kid to be invited. So as much as we can make that clear to people, of course, it's going to depend on the level of friendship you have with people. If you barely know someone and you're telling them that you want them to invite your kid to the birthday party, that might be going a little bit too far. We might have to just vent to a friend that we're upset that they weren't invited and it hurt our feelings because we are, it's a narcissistic injury to us when it isn't invited. But, if you have a deeper level of friendship with someone, I think it's always good to bring it up and say, I was surprised why, my child wasn't invited. Is there some reason? And I don't want to put people on the defensive. I think that a lot of people who have kids don't even, they might think, they might not even consider the kid with the disability. One, because when our kids are little, they might not be in their class. And if they are in their class and they have an aide perhaps, or they seem very, very different, or they're simply not friends with their child, the person having the party, it might not even cross their mind to invite that kid, because that's what happens with typical kids. If you're not friends with them, you don't invite them. Parents of kids with disabilities and parents of kids who do not have a disability, please remember that kids who have disabilities oftentimes, or kids who seem a little different, oftentimes are not invited to birthday parties. And it could be such a beautiful act of kindness to simply invite the child. And if it crosses your mind that, oh, they won't be able to come because it'll be too difficult for them, they use a wheelchair, or their behavior is such that this is just not gonna, they won't have a good time, or err on the side of inviting them and let them make that decision. Let them decide on how they're going to deal with that invitation. Okay, so that's number one. Invite them, I guess, is the number one bullet point, is simply include them and invite them. And then you could take it from there. This has happened with us where someone has said to me, oh, well, I thought that, because there's going to be a lot of food, it would be too difficult. Well, let the parent make that decision. I understand. And that's really nice that they were even considering that, because they were trying to spare us. But in the process, it made us feel unincluded, AKA excluded. So always more on the side of inviting. I don't know if you want to tell a little story, Iris, if you have one.
Yeah, I just with the
I got a lot.
Yes, I see you kind of jumped into the topic like with no stopping. I know it's a kind of like hitting close to home when we talk about parties and exclusion. Exclusion is a really hard phenomenon that if anyone had the chance to deal with before, they know how hurtful it is and how the repercussion of it like can affect for many days, weeks, and sometimes years after. So with regards to exclusion, I can say that I had that happen to me more than once, that people would tell me after the fact that, well, it was in a gymboree, so she couldn't participate, about my daughter, or it was in our house and we have 3 steps to go in, so we didn't invite you. Like all little things that we could have resolved on our own if we were aware of the challenge, problem, and also of the birthday party. I think for many kids that I know with behavioral issues, the family who celebrates tends not to invite the child with behavioral issues because they don't want them to ruin their child's special day. And there's kind of so many things to say about that and how you can prevent that from happening. But also what I want to say is, how can you expect children with behavior issues to learn how to behave in a birthday party if you never invite them? And as a society, we put a lot of emphasis on, transition ceremonies like birthday parties. And for parents of children with special needs, this is a kind of a hard point anyway, because many times as we celebrate the, kids around us and their birthdays, there are also many, many milestones that child achieved in between the previous birthday and this one. And when we compare, and I know we shouldn't compare, I am in that field, but we compare as parents always, we can't avoid it. It's human nature. And the comparison is sometimes so painful. It's just so hard to like reach, I don't know, 3 years old, 6 years old, 8 years old, and your kid keeps on falling more and more behind. And it's a difficult thing to deal with, but nevertheless, it would be very sad to have the people around us celebrate life, by celebrating the happiness that they have of having their children, and not include us in that circle. And again, Alma, you said something really important, that you don't expect or hope that, strangers or acquaintances that you're not close with would invite your kid. We are talking here about the people that are very close to us that chose, regardless, to skip our kids when it comes to special events like that. I'll have more, of course, to say again, but I'll pass the I'll pass the torch to you, and we'll continue onward.
Okay. When a parent is having a party, here's where a little tip strategy can come in. If you are having a party, whether you have a child with a disability or not, your child's needs are going to be probably different from the person you're inviting. So even if your child has a disability, the supports are going to be different. The accommodations are probably going to be different, unless you have the exact same disability and your kids are clones of each other. So it's always helpful to generalize it to all the people who are invited. And I so appreciate my friends who do this. My son's close friends, this is what we all do with each other. They let me know what they're going to be providing so that I have the opportunity to strategize with them how to make it as stress-free and as inclusive as possible. So as an example, recently I have a newer friend who is in our group, and I asked, and so the onus is on us as well as the person having the party. But I contacted the mom and I said, thank you so much for having this party. He's very excited. Can you let me know what you're going to be serving? Because she had mentioned that there would be snacks. She went on to list a very, very long list of food that was going to be served at the party, where the kids were going to be able to get the food themselves. It was going to be sort of buffet style. And I went into a panic because the first thing I thought of is, oh my gosh, my son who has Prader-Willi syndrome, who has to have limited calories and who will have the additional meltdown either at home or at the party if he sees the other kids eating it and he's not allowed to. This just set me into an emotional state. And I was like, oh my God, because what goes through my mind and through a lot of other people's minds when they find out what's going to be at a party is, oh my gosh, if I reach out to this parent, I'm going to ruin their party because their child probably wants all this stuff, all these treats and all these snacks. And here I am, I'm only one person invited to the party, and I'm asking them to change the plan of their party. And for the mom and the dad or whoever else is planning this party, we don't, we're so often in a position of asking people to accommodate for us. And it's so important that we acknowledge that there's a way to ask for accommodations that are not necessarily changing up the party. And if the people inviting us want our child to come, they will be more than happy probably to accommodate our child. They probably just don't know the ins and outs of our kids' disability and what their needs are. So I sat with this information for a little while after I got, found out what the list was. And mind you, this was going to be a bunch of snacks in between mealtime. So it was in addition to whatever we were going to give our son lunch and, for lunch and dinner. So this was going to be all additional food that I had to navigate. How are we going to be able to allow our kid to go to this party that he really wants to go to and is very excited about, and that they were excited to have him there? How are we going to navigate this with all this food that, they've planned? So I contacted the mom and I prefaced everything with, this is really awkward and I don't want to, change up your party, and I was so very appreciative because she immediately said, this is what we need to do for each other. We're friends. Let's make this work. Just, tell me what you need. So immediately it put me at ease and made me feel more comfortable that this person cares knows my kid, knows that, he has certain needs that need to be addressed at a party. And she was very open to hearing what I had to say. So we were able to completely not alter the party to the point where she wasn't going to be able to have any food, but this is what we did. We simply made a lot of the snacks lunch instead of snacks because it was a little bit late to have a lunch. It was at 1:30, but I was able to tell my son, oh, this is lunch, because
Mhm.
my, part of Prader-Willi syndrome is that there is a structure to all the meals. So if I had given him lunch, he wouldn't have understood or been able to, comprehend that that this is all additional. He would understand it on one level, but it wouldn't matter. He would want all that food. So we presented, all we had to do was change the presentation mentally, that this is lunch, instead of her having the popcorn and the pretzels and um, as something that was sitting out where the kids could get it themselves. She offered to limit, there were chicken nuggets there. She limited the number of chicken nuggets. She gave everyone the exact same amount on a plate. She put in a set amount of popcorn, a set amount of the pretzels, and all the kids were served that. She was going to have apple juice or water as a choice. She said, would it be better if I just gave water? I said, yes, please, because that's more calories. So we just altered how it was going to be done. He was still able to participate just like the other kids and not feel like he was different, because that's a real issue for my particular situation. My son feeling like he's different from everyone else. Simply changing it up and working together. We were probably on the phone talking about this for a total of 5 minutes, figuring it out. And then there were going to be treats that were associated with games that they were doing. If you won, you got these treats. And she decided to hand the bag of the treats at the end to the parent when they were being picked up, so the child didn't have control over what was in that bag. So then I could give my son a treat once a day for a dessert, one small treat, instead of him having this in his hands where he was going to eat all the candy at once. So it was a conversation. It was her being open to me asking what was going to be there, her being completely open to modifying it so that my son could be included. And it worked out perfectly. And they all had a fantastic time. I had a 3.5-hour break because I didn't have to be there monitoring this, because she promised that she and her husband were going to be supervising so he wouldn't be able to sneak any extra food. And I got a lovely break. My son was able to participate, and it was all because of open communication and being open to modifying to accommodate for inclusion.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that the bit about communication and the bit about like the little extra step that sometimes is needed to actually include kids with disability. This is what's important. Don't assume they can't participate because this is what you think about the condition. Talk to the parents and let the family decide. And in many cultures and many religions, when you have like a joyful event or a celebration in your life cycle, you also do a good deed to accompany that, whether it's donating to a charity or giving something to the poor, whatever it is in your culture. But we are inviting you today to consider as your good deed to invite a child who's not maybe necessarily a very good friend of your child, but to invite them to a birthday party. It would be such a contribution to the kids that are in the party to be exposed to inclusion and to be exposed to a child who's a little different than they are, whether it's behavior or physical ability, or I guess other maybe facial deformity, whichever it is. Exposure is always good and educational, and B, you'll be doing a good deed for that child and their family, because when we include people, we do a good, not just for the family, but for society as a whole. And
that's not charity. That's, again, I always want to differentiate between pity.
It's a good deed.
It's something that is, it's not pitying the person. It's including them. And there's a difference. There's a real difference. And you're reminding me of, in the Jewish culture, when a boy turns 13 and a girl turns 12 or 13, there is a big party called a bar mitzvah or b'nai mitzvah. Or a bas mitzvah if it's a girl. And I will never forget, I went to one of we have family friends, and their son had a bar mitzvah. And I saw so many kids who were, I knew because I've lived in this town for a long time, who had disabilities. And he invited all of them that were in the school. And I just, and it wasn't just that he invited them as a token gesture, he was friends with them and they were all there. And it made me really realize how there are so many bar mitzvahs in our town. And I have dropped my kids off at so many of them. We've had our own for our kids, and you don't see these kids being invited. And all the kids go back to school and they talk about how fun the party was and all this. And these kids are not invited typically. And again, I don't think it's an act of malice not to, they're intentionally not inviting them, but they're not on the radar of the kids. And it's just an extra level of pain, for everyone involved. And again, this isn't just kids with disabilities. These are also other kids who were just not invited. So when having a party for your child at any age, we implore you, think about people who may not be invited to, that it might mean something really significant for kids who may not be invited to a lot of things, to invite them. It goes a long way.
Yeah, and like I can think just off the top of my head about like different accommodations that in my kind of close circle we had to do before. And the things, for example, we have a girl in our group that has a severe food allergies. And for her, because she cannot even be around because it's touch contamination also can be, so we always kind of separate the parties into two sections, the activity portion and the food portion. And then when the activity is over, we give that kid a goodie bag before she leaves. And that concludes the party for her. And only after she leaves, then we serve the food. So there isn't kind of, she doesn't miss the party as a whole. And also what you mentioned about goodie bags, this is a very easy way to kind of level the playing field, is to use goodie bags that are not transparent. And then if there's food allergies or any other food related issues, you fill the goodie bag of the child with the food kind of challenges with non-food items. You can give all the other kids candies. I'm against candies anyway, but never mind. But you give all the other kids whatever you wanted to originally give, what your child maybe chose to put in the goodie bags, but you prepare a nice goodie bag in advance for that child, so there isn't a problem later on at home that they don't carry a bag of trouble for when they arrive home. So that's like a little thing that can be done. And also with accommodations, sometimes I'm actually like shocked with the level of consideration and thought that other parents are putting into inviting my kid to their party. Like, again, an example, I guess in early ages, there is a lot of time, very active birthday parties in which the kids are going to a trampoline arena or like a gymboree or whatever it is. There's like a bouncy castle hall, whatever. And many times I would like have friends of mine call me and say, okay, we already talked to the venue. They are completely wheelchair accessible. They have two instructors that said that they can lift her out of the wheelchair and bring her to the trampoline. The only thing that they can't do is the monkey bar. Are you okay with like skipping the monkey bar? I was just like, oh my gosh, thank you. Like they thought like 10 steps ahead of me. And that's like so super kind. In parties that were made at home, I had a mom once do like those social games that kids have to pass a ball, do this, do that, and she went ahead and thinking of like a game that my daughter with her limited mobility can participate in, and created kind of an activity. And when they needed to choose volunteers for that game, they started with inviting my daughter, and that's just like, you can't stop being grateful for that. And it's just so important. I know that for each family, for each child, the challenges might be different. Some kids cannot tolerate like loud music. Other kids are afraid of balloons. There's like many different variations to what might be the problem. But the easiest way is A, to invite, and B, to check with the parents, to make that extra phone call, not just to send an invitation. And for like 2 minutes, just discuss the venue, the food, and possible kind of social interactions that might be problematic. And trust me, the parents would be so happy to have you think about them. Yes. They would find a way to make it happen. And it's really an opportunity to not just again to do good, but to make our world a better place, one birthday party at a time. That's what I think.
Beautiful, beautiful. One more thing that you're reminding me of is a way to accommodate someone is to allow them to have, or to invite the parent or a guardian to assist the child, because and sometimes parties are expensive. I was just talking about bar mitzvahs, or if you're talking about a sweet 16 as the kids get older, or a quinceañera, sometimes kids really can't function on their own well enough to be able to be at a party by themselves. So offering to invite the aide or the parent is something that's very generous. If you're able to do that, that would be great. I've had to, be in the awkward position of saying, my son can attend, but I need to be there with him. Is that okay? And when oftentimes at these kinds of events, if you are having a party at a place of worship, you may not know from a place of worship, and you may not know the families that well. Yet the child is still invited. You don't have to bring your child. You don't even have to tell your child that they're invited, because if this is someone who's an acquaintance, but the whole class is being invited, there have been times where I didn't attend. I didn't even tell my son about it because he didn't know the child anyway. And it was going to be a major stressor to have all of that food there. It would just have been so traumatic for my son to not be able to eat the food. And even if I were there would be a lot of problems. And I have chosen to just simply not, to decline politely. Thank you so much, but we're not going to be able to attend, because this isn't a person that he even is friends with. So I just avoid the event altogether. But if it is someone and you'd like your child to go, and if it is a family friend or someone that is important, I would just ask. They can always say no and say, I totally understand if you can't accommodate yet another person to the party. But I would ask, because if they're inviting your child, I would imagine that they have some sense that there are some needs there that are going to need to be addressed or accommodated. So just ask. They can always say no if you can attend.
Yes, and this is a shout out for families with kids with disabilities. If you did say that you are coming and the other family is making the effort and bothering to accommodate you, whether they changed the menu or made a special arrangement in one or another way for your child, please attend. Or yes, just decline ahead of time, because this is such a bad, I think, social relationship to make another family go out of your way to accommodate and make changes and then not to show up. I have to say, this happened to me kind of on the organizing side. And sometimes we invested a lot of time and effort to kind of create, whether it was a menu or activity or, a giveaway that would be inclusive of a specific child. And then the family didn't show up the last minute. And it was like, wow, we went through so many different channels to make it work. And that was in a way also insulting. So yeah, that's something important to remember. But these are rare occasions. And I think all in all, please do invite us. And now I want to kind of maybe change the angle a bit and talk about our kids' birthdays and us inviting other people to attend our birthdays. And that being said, I think that many times when we invite people, I think they think to themselves, but my kid is not a very good friend of your child. They barely talk to each other at school. Parents, wake up call. We invite your kid, even though he's not a good friend of your kid or our kid, because our kid does not have any good friends. They don't sometimes have any friends at all. Please, please bring your kids to our birthday parties, because otherwise we'll just be sitting at home with a crying child with a cake that nobody is there to
Oh,
eat.
you're killing me. You're killing me, Iris.
Well, it's true. You know, I once we had a bat mitzvah party that never happened. Thank you, COVID. Yeah,
My
it's
kids
like,
were very upset because they were invited and they were gonna go.
I
And it was
know.
canceled, but it was COVID.
Yes, like 10 days after the quarantine started, everything was ready. Anyway, moving on. But you know, my own brother was telling me that, well, we don't want to come from far away because there would be so many people that maybe we should come when you guys are less busy or something like that. I understand the logic, but I also like, it's kind of like, listen, how many people do you think there are in our lives that would really come and give our child the love she needs on that special day?
Mhm.
This is not a normal situation. And I know sometimes for our friends and family, it's hard to understand the concept of a child growing up in a level of social isolation, because there is always a level of social isolation that comes with the disability, and how much their support and involvement is important to our child and to us as a family. And I want to encourage everybody, if you are invited, please bring in the energy, bring in your kids, and just help us celebrate, because it is hard as is.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought that up because it's people have to step up. I'm just gonna say it. You know, family and close friends, time to step up because we love you and we count on your support, because sometimes we don't have the support of the outside world as much as we'd like to, as much as, you know, we'd like for our children. So when thinking, okay, am I going to be able to do this? Put that extra bit of energy and time in to come. I'm glad you brought that up because that's a big one that I think a lot of people deal with.
Yes. And then I think that there is always kind of maybe a level of uncomfortableness around gifts. And people many times kind of were like, what does she want for a gift? They were really like helpless and clueless about gifts. So I want to say, first of all, just come. We really, really don't care about the gifts. The gifts are not important. It's your presence. It's the event. It's the experience. Please forget about
Not
the gifts.
my kid.
Yeah.
Not my kid. My kid wants the presents. So bring them.
Okay.
And it doesn't have to, it could be an event, it could be an outing. It doesn't have to be something that costs a lot of money, but you better show up with something or I'm going to be hearing about it for the next 2 years from him.
Yeah. But again, if this is something that intimidates you, making that call to the parents is always a good strategy. And I think we are going to do a separate episode about gifts and about kind of family events and what other recommendations for our kids. We can go a little bit into details about it today, but in general, I wanted to say that the parents are your best allies when it comes to an event like that. Always just make a phone call, send a text, ask something, and don't be intimidated to look maybe, I guess, unknowledgeable or uneducated or something like that. Even with typical kids, I sometimes like text the parents, like, what would Johnny like for his birthday? Is a Lego set okay? Or would he prefer, I don't know, Monopoly? I don't know. But just ask. It's okay not to know. And it's and we know that Johnny and my daughter are not good friends, and they're just in the same class together. So just call and we will tell you.
Yes, no big deal. No big deal. Well, I hope we've given a lot of useful information. Please, in the comments, please let us know your failed stories on your part, on other people's parts, and what people have done, more importantly, to make a better experience for your birthday parties and for when you attend other people's birthday parties. These are really, really meaningful events. It's not just a birthday party. It packs a lot of, it's very layered. It's very loaded. So we really, we wanted to make this episode a separate episode just about birthday parties because all kids have them. All right.
Thank you, Alma. And
thank you.
thank you for everyone who was listening today. And looking forward to seeing you again soon. Bye.
Have a great week. Bye-bye.
For more information, please go to www.twomomsnofluff.com. Thank you.